first want to say the director of Secret Service is a woman named Kim Cheadle. Okay, and you already know what I'm going to say. Oh, there's going to be the headlines. Canada says that women shouldn't be pilots and women shouldn't be running a security apparatus. No disrespect to the many women who are willing to lay down their lives, right? I have no disrespect. There are tons of women who can shoot guns, right? And shoot them very well. But when it comes to the responsibility of guarding the former president of the United States, we need men. Can we acknowledge reality? Are we allowed to acknowledge gender and sex and the natural biological proclivities of men versus women? Are we allowed to do that? Because guess what? I don't care whether we're allowed to do it. I've been doing it the entire time. I want male pilots. I want male security guards. I want men back, okay? Men back doing male tasks that they are naturally inclined to do because of their body composition, because of the testosterone that is coursing through their veins. When we are talking about guarding the life of President Donald J. Trump, the fact that there were so many women there is just unbelievable.
So Donald Trump was shot at by a Republican using a gun that pretty much every single Republican feels that every American should legally be able to own. And what are they blaming for this near assassination? Wokeness. So not surprising to anyone that conservatives have complete brain rot in that they don't blame anything else apart from, oh, the director of the Secret Service is a woman and Trump had 2 female bodyguards. Therefore, yeah, he might have nearly died because of women and diversity. So stupid. But of course, what can you expect when you're dealing with these people? And I feel like Twitter has not only like radicalized conservatives, it's just made them like so incoherent. Like I don't even understand what their point is because yeah, like I said, the guy who shot at Trump was conservative. We don't know the motives yet, but most people who knew him said he was a conservative. He was registered as a Republican, made one donation when he was like 17 to like a progressive PAC or a Democratic PAC. And of course, if these conservatives aren't banging on about the female Secret Service agents, they're talking about it being a CIA conspiracy to like blame the violence on Trump because, as we all know, a Trump supporter would have never done something violent. So therefore, it must be the CIA framing Trump supporters to hand the election to Biden or something. So I do want to talk about that stuff. But the second part of this video, which I feel is more important and is a take I want to get out there, is, you know, political violence. So you saw people from across the political spectrum in America saying there is no place for political violence. There's no place for violence in politics, which is just so hilarious coming out of the mouths of any US politician, but in particular, politicians who, for the most part, have funded the Israeli genocide throughout and have vocally supported the Israeli genocide and vocally just support a violent society, right? Like how many of these people now condemning political violence supported the NYPD and the LAPD going in and brutalizing student protesters for exercising their First Amendment right? Is that not political violence? And I want to talk about this also in the context of a lot of liberals have been making jokes and just basically saying, oh, I wish that guy did kill Trump. And if they did kill Trump, they would have been a hero because, as we all know, once you kill one bad man, the whole bad system goes away because most liberals get their whole understanding of the world from books like Harry Potter. So yeah, Trump is Voldemort. You kill Voldemort and the world's a better place. And I'm going to dispute that because I don't think it's a good thing someone tried to kill Trump. And I don't think it would be a good thing if someone did kill Trump. And I would also say nothing would be achieved for the good of humanity or for the good of politics in America if the assassin was successful, because Trump is just simply a symptom of everything bad in American politics, right? You get rid of him, either, you know, he lost the primary or someone kills him. It really doesn't matter because the next person to replace him will be just as bad. What is the difference between Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump? Like nothing, right? So if you get rid of Donald Trump by whatever means, what does that do for American politics? Absolutely nothing. So anyone being really upset it didn't happen and stuff, and thinking the world would be a better place if the assassin actually shot and killed Trump, Again, they basically just see the world as like, like I said, Harry Potter. So all of that coming up for you today, of course. This video is not going to be monetized, so if you want me to cover more topics like this, consider becoming a patron. Trying to build up as many $1 to $3 patrons as possible. Benefits include access to the Discord server and access to my videos ad-free and often, for the most part, early as well. Also, follow me on social media, my Instagram mainly. And with that out the way, let's get into the video. So Trump's attempted assassination, of course, massive news story. And with political assassinations, you're always going to get conspiracy theories. I guess it normally takes a bit longer to get into them because we have them about Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., JFK. But the thing with those conspiracy theories is they're pretty credible, so much so like Martin Luther King's own family don't believe the guy who was arrested for killing him actually did it. And of course, if you look at the evidence for the JFK assassination, in my opinion, it was like rogue CIA working with fascist Cuban exiles and the Italian mob to kill JFK, and I think it was like a solo op that was found out by the leadership of the CIA and then covered up afterwards, right? That's what I believe based on the evidence, and that all seems pretty credible. Even with RFK, I'm not convinced that wasn't the CIA, even though the evidence in regard to that is, I guess, plays less into the conspiracy theories around it than the JFK stuff does. But now we have just stupid ones that emerge straight away that Donald Trump was either nearly killed because of the CIA and wanted to blame that on Trump supporters, or he was also nearly killed because of the ineptitude of women, and they're just like bad at their jobs being, security for the presidents. And therefore the real story in this isn't a conservative man trying to kill the former president. It's actually female Secret Service agents being bad at their job. So Charlie Kirk was talking about this to start with, talking about the ineptitude of the Secret Service. And of course, the real story is the Secret Service and the local police were useless at their jobs, that so many random people saw the shooter setting up, trying to tell police, and they took so long to even go to his position. So Matt Walsh was just tweeting loads of stuff about this, and you saw his Secret Service at the RNC is all men, so they're celebrating this stuff as well. You have other accounts like this saying Trump walking around taking selfies with the crowd at the RNC. His security detail around him is now 9 yoked out dudes, no women. Matt Walsh tweeting feminists in the movies versus feminists in reality, having Wonder Woman versus a picture. Just one screenshot of one of the female Secret Service agents kind of ducking down while moving to Donald Trump. I don't know what they wanted this person to do instead. Everyone talking about DEI and its consequences. Candace Owens obviously making a video talking about how men should protect men and that women aren't suited to the job of protecting the presidents.
I don't mind these women in roles if they're organizing the security apparatus. I think women are very good at organizing. We are naturally more organized, okay? I think that women do better when it comes to multitasking, as just one example. That's why there's the expression, if you want to get something done, hand it to a busy mom. Do you know what we're not good at? Being under pressure in situations that are life or death, okay? That is not our natural proclivity. Now, if a kid's there, I've seen some incredible things. But when it comes to this sort of an operation, you're trying to strive to have majority women? Who do you think could win in a fight? Her or Trump? That's a problem, okay? We need strong men. We need strong men that are laser focused.
And then, this is the most telling, just complete mask off. Matt Walsh retweeting Jake Shields. This is exactly why women should not be in the police, military, or Secret Service. No women in any of these. Her one job was to jump in front and take a bullet for Trump, but instead she cowered behind him. I don't even blame the girl. I blame those who hired her. The Secret Service's job isn't jump on Donald Trump and take the bullets for him. Obviously, they're a team. They all have different roles. And you saw a lot of them huddled around him to start with. You don't need every single agent there to huddle around Donald Trump. There's only so many you can have. So it stands to reason a lot of them had different roles. So just because this woman didn't dive in front of Trump straight away doesn't mean she was doing a bad job. And even if there's incompetence here as well, why does her being a woman make a difference? It's just an excuse to be blatant misogynist. And again, people like Matt Walsh, they are just outright fascist. They don't want women in any aspect of society apart from being wives and mothers, which I've spoke about a lot. That is like one of the dominant narratives. And they're now all talking about like, when is she going to resign, the director of the Secret Service, because she's a woman as well. And yeah, it's just so insane that you have such a historic moment, like pretty unprecedented in modern American politics, like someone actually trying to kill a presidential candidate. When's the last time that happened? You know, RFK in 1968, of course, Reagan got shot as well. But it's something that hasn't been common in American politics for a long time, right? But now they're just all focused on this red pill misogyny bullshit that if Trump died, it's women's fault. No one else's fault. Just the female Secret Service. And again, like I said, totally ignoring, how did this dude get a gun like that? Do you want to talk about the gun laws in that state, that a guy can get off like 8 rounds before being taken out by Secret Service? He can just set up on a rooftop and do that? Like, this dude just took his like dad's gun and did this. And as a left-wing person, generally, I don't like violence. I don't like guns. You know, in the UK, I don't support any movement to legalize firearms more than they are. But if I was an American, I probably would support the Second Amendment out of self-preservation for myself, because I know how hostile the state and like different militias would be to my own personal safety. But at the same time, this is a hot debate in the US, and you'd think they'd talk about that angle more, or even defend that angle more, but they're not even doing it this time. They're saying everything to do with this one guy, that's all conspiracy CIA bullshit, and we should actually focus on the failures of the Secret Service, namely, the females failed. Even though if there were any failures, there's like far more men in the Secret Service protecting Trump, so the failures would be theirs as well. I really don't understand this point. But now let's move on a little bit. So obviously, you saw loads of people, including progressives, tweeting like, political violence is absolutely unacceptable. I wish Donald Trump and anyone else who may have been hurt a speedy recovery. That's by Bernie Sanders, right after he posted an op-ed supporting Joe Biden for president. So support Joe Biden for president, the guy arming a genocide right now, but also political violence is absolutely unacceptable. Of course, everyone's sick of just politicians being hypocrites. AOC also tweeting, there is no place for political violence, including the horrific incident we just witnessed. My heart goes out to all the victims and I wish the former president a speedy recovery. Look, am I saying I expect progressive lawmakers to come out and say something like about Donald Trump saying, oh my God, like I wish he was killed or something like that? No, I don't. But also the tone of their tweets is so funny. I've been told that Donald Trump is literally Hitler by every single Democratic politician. And if you're using that framing, it stands to reason that people aren't going to be actually that upset if, you know, literally Hitler gets shot. But also you suddenly turning around and saying, I pray for the president, I hope he gets better. You hope Hitler gets better? Now, I dispute the Hitler comparison, right? And I also dispute it for a number of reasons. I dispute it mainly because the way we talk about World War II history, we act like Hitler like manipulated the whole of German society like on his own. And if someone had gone back in time and killed Hitler, it would have saved the world from the Holocaust, World War II. It was this one man who did it all. And again, that's just bullshit. And you know, if you study history properly, if you understand systems, if you understand politics, if Hitler was killed like early on in his reign, or if he was killed before the Nazis were even a big thing, it's very likely most things would have still occurred in the same way. If Hitler was gone, how many Nazis were in the top leadership that would have replaced him who were exactly the same as him? So many. So even that framing by Democrats, again, is funny because now they back themselves into a corner that I meant to believe Trump is Hitler. Now apparently killing Hitler is bad, and most people understand it the way I described it, right? It's an individual, and you must get rid of the individual to save American democracy. Trump is the unique threat to American democracy. It's not the Republican Party. It's not capitalism. It's just Donald Trump on his own. You guys might be wondering, what would I even want Bernie Sanders and AOC to say? If I was like a politician, I had to be more diplomatic about this stuff, I would say, you know, there's no place for violence in American politics. At the same time, Donald Trump and his supporters have continually escalated violent rhetoric against politicians and just general people in society. Donald Trump supporters have killed people and said Donald Trump inspired them. Of course, we had January 6th, obviously inspired and galvanized by Donald Trump. So Donald Trump should look at himself and think about the violence he creates and the violent atmosphere he creates in American society, which nearly killed him. That would be the correct response, in my opinion. Not thoughts and prayers to the guy I called Hitler like last week. Like, I just don't understand this framing, and it just plays into Trump's hands, doesn't it? If you're all saying, oh my God, pray for Trump, I hope he gets better, you're playing into a sympathy train for Donald Trump like he's some sort of victim of violence that he hasn't encouraged himself, right? So that's the one thing I will say about that. But yeah, like I was saying, I don't think it would be a good thing for America if Donald Trump was shot. And obviously, I'm anti-fascist, I'm anti-capitalist, very, very left-wing. And I don't like violence, right? Don't like violence. But decrying all political violence, again, is interesting from American politicians and obviously like American Republicans. So in the context of what we're seeing there, like I said, there is no case you can make, I don't think, from a left-wing point of view, that killing an individual like Donald Trump is a good thing for the world. Firstly, a lot of left-wing people, we don't support the death penalty. So no matter what you think of what Donald Trump's done, and he deserves to go to prison, not just for the numerous crimes he's done, but for what he did as president, war criminal, deserves to rot in prison. I wouldn't advocate for like capital punishment for his various crimes, right? So in that sense, I don't believe him being executed by one of his followers or whatever is actually a good thing, because I don't want that generally in society. And like I was saying, it's an individualist view on this stuff. It's this main character Hollywood syndrome of, if you just stop the bad guy, then, you know, American democracy wins. Donald Trump is a unique threat. And we can peel that back so much to discuss, like, all of this way of thinking. So liberals firmly believe that Joe Biden is going to save American democracy, right? Just the general system, they're all in bed together with the corporations, right? So getting rid of one of these people literally does nothing. And also, it gives incentive to the intelligence agencies to crack down more on just anyone who poses any opposition to the elite, right? So although it was a conservative who shot Trump, how much do you think they're going to crack down more on left-wing gun owners or left-wing people in like socialist rifle organizations or like pro-Palestinian protesters? I read today that Joe Biden wants to start condemning the political violence by focusing on pro-Palestinian protesters, right? So they'll use that, the whole elite will use that to crack down on all of you. Even though Joe Biden obviously doesn't like Donald Trump, doesn't matter. He's going to use that to crack down on all of us together. The same way they did that in 9/11. The same way they did that back in the day in the 1980s. Oh, we have to protect America from communists. Let me just spy on literally everyone though, just in case. 9/11, we have to protect people from Al-Qaeda. Let me just spy on everyone who might oppose the government though, just in case. Events like the attempted assassination of Donald Trump just give an excuse to the surveillance state to just be emboldened even further. So on that note, thinking this is a good event at all, or thinking if it succeeded, it would be good, is really stupid as well. And yeah, individualist violence in history rarely has an outcome that is worth it. If there was some sort of like insurgency against like the US government that was like massively popular, you could understand the context a bit more. Like let's say the Philippines, where there's like actually like a communist mass movement, a communist insurgency. You could understand like opposing tyrannical governments in that sense, but Donald Trump isn't even like the president, right? He's a presidential candidate, and it's one lone wolf doing that. No mass movement. Donald Trump is insanely popular. It literally will achieve absolutely nothing. The context of political violence always matters to if it's even like worth it, right? So in my own history, I've talked about this a lot in the past, but one of my ancestors was in the Irish Republican Brotherhood. He wrote the Irish Proclamation, which was essentially like the founding document of the Irish Republic, kind of like the Declaration of Independence. He organised the Easter Rising, which was a militant uprising against the British Empire and their Irish collaborators in Dublin, and he was executed by the British afterwards and was remembered as a martyr. And in Cuba, of course, you had like a mass movement against Batista, and if Fidel Castro had just shot Batista one day, just decided he wanted to without that mass movement, what would that have achieved in Cuba? Absolutely nothing. If my ancestor went into Downing Street and shot the Prime Minister, or went into Buckingham Palace and shot the King of England, what would that have achieved? Nothing, right? So if you're a leftist, this individualist violence against people you don't like, without the context of some sort of mass movement against tyranny and imperialism, It's just absolutely pointless, and it's just a massive negative to anything you want to achieve. And obviously, I admit, like, people are terrible. Donald Trump is a terrible person, but again, we don't believe, generally, a lot of left-wing people, in violence for the sake of violence. It's about broader mass movements, and it seems like also a last resort, and there's varying scales as well. I have my Irish ancestors, you have the Egyptian Revolution, which was violent as well, but not at the same scale as the Irish Revolution, and they overthrew their tyrannical government as well. And let's talk about political violence in that context. The elite have such a monopoly on political violence that you don't even see it as political violence. Of Ireland, for example, I'm an Irish person who was born in England, raised in England, so I have both sides. I see how the English media cover Irish issues. I have the Irish family who talk about Irish issues in a completely different way. The amount in this country, the IRA, are made to seem like they just appeared out of the ether, like all they wanted to do was just kill civilians, right? Without any context, is a perfect, I guess, summation of how the elite monopolize political violence. In this country, we are not taught about the UVF. In this country, we're not properly taught about the English occupation of Ireland. We're not properly taught about the Irish famine, which was created by British capitalism. And they knew it was killing all these people. We don't talk about the occupation in Northern Ireland after the Republic's independence. We don't talk about all this stuff. So the context is that's normal. And that's what the elite always do. That's normal. The status quo is normal. English occupation of Ireland was just the default state of the world. And because it happens over such a long period of time, like the Irish example, that's how they help normalise it. So England has always been an island. Northern Ireland has always been English. We've been there for like 400 years. So the IRA suddenly rebelling and doing terrible violence in a shorter period of time that sticks in people's minds, they're actually the people who cause the problems. It's not the political violence enacted on the Irish people for centuries, because we've normalised that. The elite say that's fine. The press say that's fine, so that's all okay. Now, in the American context, think of all these politicians who back Israel, because that's the status quo. We back Israel. We back everything they do. Israel has a right to exist. And opposing that is actually anti-Semitic, right? And Hamas, which is a response to Israeli colonialism and the Israeli occupation, and in part created by the IDF itself, they're actually the troublemakers. If Hamas didn't exist, then the Palestinian people would be free and they could all live in harmony. Because you're gaslit. The political violence of apartheid, the normalization of apartheid by Israel, that's the status quo, and you're told that's fine. That political violence is fine. The US funding that is fine. Political violence done back to that side, though, that's the bad political violence. And that's why using this term about political violence is never acceptable. These people just are not consistent. If you're backing political violence around the world and actually calling all the peacemakers like anti-Semites who support terrorism, but at the same time you only condemn political violence when it's someone you like getting shot at, then it just shows you're absolutely full of shit. But it's literally just like part of American identity to have a monopoly on political violence. America was founded as this genocidal settler colony which inspired not just Israel, it inspired Nazi Germany. Hitler actually wanted to replicate what the Americans did in Eastern Europe, right? But that was so normalized. Native savages. Let's celebrate Independence Day. The Independence Day of, all these slave owners creating their own country, which they then proceeded to do even more genocide, claiming the rest of the territory for themselves. Independence Day, that political violence is good. It's not even really political violence. It's just seen as like a moral thing that these people had to do against the British Empire to create this terrible country, right? But if the Native Americans like fight back, if people fight back, think of like the Haitian Revolution, think of slave uprisings in America. Well, that's political violence, isn't it? Because they went against the status quo and they used political violence against the system. So that should be condemned. And that is really, really bad. But the slow political violence of the state, whether that be the American state, the Israeli state, or the British state, that's fine. That's fine because it's the status quo, and I've been told all my life that's the way things are. So Northern Ireland that's just part of England, isn't it? I've been told that all my life, and if anyone has a problem with that, if they had a problem with it in 1969, or they have a problem with it today, and if they're either activists, civil rights campaigners, as they were before they started getting shot at by the British, or whether they're militants, that political violence is never justifiable, and it's inherently really, really immoral, but the political violence enacted on them first because it's a status quo and because the elite back it, that's unproblematic. And as I've said in this video, I am really not a violent person. I don't like violence. I don't like war. I'm completely against what happened to Donald Trump. Don't think that achieves the aims of anyone. Don't think that helps anyone. And I think completely ignores the real problem of the American system being terrible, and taking out one bad actor in the system itself doesn't do anything, especially without the context of any sort of mass movement to reform or overthrow the system. I also recognize sometimes with political violence, it becomes so untenable for a certain group of people, they just have to fight back and use political violence against this system that has used political violence against them their entire existence. So my own ancestor, he's remembered as a hero. There are statues of him in Ireland. There's paintings of him in Ireland. There's murals to him in Ireland. He's remembered as a hero. Him and hundreds of thousands of Irish people used political violence against a system that had just dehumanized them and treated them terribly and had reduced the Irish population to a level that has never recovered, right? And they used political violence back against the political violence. And in hindsight, it's hard to see that they weren't justified in doing this. So that's the Irish Revolution, the Cuban Revolution. You understand political violence sometimes is used against this inherent violent system that is often far, far worse than what these people are doing. But you're always told, because these people are against the status quo, it's easier to demonize these people. So again, as someone who isn't violent, who doesn't like violence, who doesn't like war, you have to recognize sometimes political violence has been the only answer. And it's just like such a vague term, like, you know, World War II is political violence, isn't it? Are you saying it wasn't justified to invade like Vichy France or whatever? Like, it's a really weird term they're talking about. So yeah, to summarize, political violence in the context of Donald Trump nearly being killed is condemned. I've outlined my reasons why I think it's a bad thing. But at the same time, one person nearly getting shot is treated like the worst thing ever, while every single person in the American establishment, lots of people who've said this political violence is unacceptable, including people in Israel itself, they have killed nearly 200,000 people in Gaza. No issue. They have no issue about political violence, and that is literally done only for political reasons, to expand the Israeli state. And that's because, like I said, the elite have a monopoly on violence. You celebrate Independence Day in America like it's a great thing when it's the day you establish a settler colony. Israel celebrate Independence Day literally a day before the Nakba Day, which sums it up. But to them, their political violence, which also included like actual terrorism, but because he created a state where this was all normalized, that's not seen as like terrible political violence. But a Palestinian throwing a rock at a border wall, that's pretty much seen as worse in the context of Israel, right? So that's what you have to understand. Even if you're someone who hates violence, even if you're someone who hates conflict and war, and I'm sure a lot of people watching this channel do, you just have to recognize both how this works and how it's the elite who often create the conditions for political violence against them through their overwhelming state-sanctioned violence, which is never seen as controversial because, of course, they control everything in your society, including the media. So you're brainwashed essentially from birth to feel certain ways about certain political violence and feel other ways about certain political violence. And like I said, if you were raised in England, you will think the IRA are literally worse than the British Empire. And I'm not joking, that is basically what you get taught because you're not taught any of the context that created groups like the IRA in the first place, and that is the state monopoly on things like political violence. So that is it for the video. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and if you made it this far, thank you for watching.